property is different. It's going to likely, have appreciation, but it also has tax benefits, right? If it does depreciate, then it kind of gives you a cushion that you can have for your W-2 later down the line. So, there's more benefits into owning property over any other monetary item, like even gold. Yeah, you can own it, but it's not the risk behind that is much different, and you're not going to make passive income off of it. That's why I thought it was a good idea. There's this idea that it can kind of take care of it itself in the background as long as you address all those pieces.
Welcome to the Real Estate Mogul MD podcast. Thanks for tuning in and taking control of your financial future. This is a show where we not only motivate and inspire, we give you actionable, real-world experience to help you live life by design. You'll hear journeys and stories from other physicians, investors, coaches, consultants, and entrepreneurs. And now, here's your host, Brett Riggins. Today, we welcome Dr. Harman Chopra, a Johns Hopkins resident with a unique perspective on real estate investing and alternative income streams. From buying his first condo to exploring farmland investments, Dr. Chopra is here to share how physicians can balance their careers with building wealth. Harman, welcome to the show. Here we are. It's the beginning of, it's January, and you're in NYC, aren't you?
Well, I'm from NYC. I'm actually in Baltimore right now.
Baltimore.
My residency's at Johns Hopkins.
Just as cold then, right?
Yeah, it's pretty cold here, even for Baltimore. People said the winters are mild. There's been 6 inches of snow here for a week already, so it's not that mild.
Oh my goodness. So out on the East Coast in medicine, let's start there. Tell a little bit about your journey to the listeners, where you started and where you're at currently.
Yeah, so I grew up in Queens, New York my entire life. I went to college there at St. John's University, did pre-med. Then from there, I ventured on to Syracuse, New York to do my med school at SUNY Upstate. I did my MD there, finished it in 2021, graduated, went to Arizona to do my intern year. Because a close friend of mine had moved there. And then I moved back to Baltimore in 2022 to start my residency, which I'm in my last year now, finishing up this June, and then heading back to New York to Cornell to finish my last year of training in chronic pain fellowship.
Very cool, very cool. So along this journey, how does that relate with real estate in your world? So tell us a little bit about your journey with real estate so far.
So it's real estate is part of anyone's journey that's going to be employed in the United States, whether you want to do it now, whether you want to do it later. And I'm blessed that I had parents who were supportive of the pursuit of trying to buy property as early as possible when it came to residency. When I moved to Baltimore, I realized the market here was pretty stagnant, and it had been for several years. I looked at the prices and pretty much gone nowhere for the last 10, 15 years. And with the rates where they were at that time, which is around 4 or 5%, I thought it'd be prudent to buy a condo rather than pay rent for 3 years and lose the same amount of money, which is around $2,000 a month, almost $70,000 over 3 years I would have lost. And I'd rather just invested that into a piece of property. And that kind of spurred the idea that real estate investment isn't as complex as I thought it originally was. I mean, getting a condo here was not easy. There was a lot of paperwork. But once it was all said and done, that's pretty much it. You pay the mortgage every month and it goes on. And that kind of really got me thinking, that might be a better place to put my money in rather than trying to find stocks or something that's going to miraculously blow up over the next few years and have something that could create passive income in the background. Because as a physician that's going into an interventional fellowship, opening up a private practice is in the future. And for that, having my own property would also be wise because that could be part of my business model, not having to lose money on rent every month. So that really started getting me thinking, and I've been fortunate that I've been able to take part of it.
All right, so the real estate is a piece of everybody's journey. I do agree, and you've elected to go with acquiring your condo there in Baltimore. That's something I think that a lot of early physicians struggle with. The idea of, hey, do I rent? Do I buy? And then you're going to be bouncing around depending on certain things. But in the idea that you've bought, tell me a little bit about how that pairs into your investment strategy. Have you started thinking about buying not only to live in, but as an investment? Now, don't get me wrong. I know where we're at in the career. I know the challenges. I don't know it personally, but I can imagine the challenges. Going from med school into residency and then becoming an attending physician. So there's some increase in pay. So as a resident right now, tell me a little bit about your thought path. Like, what does investing look like for you?
So right now, it pretty much doesn't, is how investing looks at me. In the beginning, it was paycheck to paycheck, and now I'm finally starting to have some money that I can put aside to save. Really, it was many parts to that equation of buying versus renting at that time. One of which was looking at the surrounding property. Like, what's the average rent like? What am I going to be paying every month? And then right now, the way the rates are, I would probably be paying more than what the rent is. With that, with the rates at over 7%, I would be paying more than rent. And that kind of makes it difficult, because what you also have to think about is, as a resident, I'm only going to be here for a couple of years, maybe 3, 4, 5, whatever it is. What's going to happen to that property after you leave? Where I am in Baltimore, the state of the city is such that there's only 3, maybe 4 neighborhoods around the university that residents stay in, which really minimizes the areas to look at, and it kind of helps you out as a renter, as a landlord. Because now when you leave, you know that people are going to come to these neighborhoods anyways, and you have access to a network that a lot of other people in the area won't have, which is your university's program. Johns Hopkins has their own portal to rent out to people that you can put on their own websites, all internally done, so it's safer. There's a risk of credit checks and getting paired with someone that may not pay you down the line, or mitigated compared to other options. So that was one of the factors that pushed me towards it. Like, I'll have that after I leave, an alumni network that I could rent to other people as it goes along, and it'll pay for it in the background. And based on what the current cost of running this place is per month, which is the mortgage, the HOA, which includes parking, it's still well under what average studios are around in the neighborhood. So I know I'm competitive in the market, and I will be for a long time. The property I bought, it's a waterfront, it's a historic building, so there was that factor. And really the key aspect to it was the growth in this area was lacking for a long time, but the neighborhood itself was so developed. And all around me, literally within the first month of me moving here, they built a Starbucks down 2 blocks away from me. And I read somewhere, some of my financial friends told me that Starbucks being built in a neighborhood is usually indicative of economic growth. And I don't know what the math behind that is, but it does help, and it did. And they've also created a lot of new luxury condo developments all around. Kind of like my condo is the central point, and all around me is expanding further out. So I thought it was like a very good place to own a piece of property in general, whether or not I was going to be here. So really, these are all these factors you have to look at, and ultimately, there's that kind of, you have to take that leap of faith. Is this going to work out? It may not. But as long as you don't buy at an all-time high, at a terrible rate, you're probably going to be in a good positioning no matter what, because you're not paying the maximal you could have. Like, it's like buying a car when there's no cars left in the showroom. You're going to pay over it, but that's a depreciating asset. Property is different. It's going to likely have appreciation, but it also has tax benefits, right? If it does depreciate, then it kind of gives you a cushion that you could have for your W-2 later down the line. So there's more benefits into owning property over any other monetary item, like even gold. Yeah, you can own it, but it's not the risk behind that is much different, and you're not going to make passive income off of it. That's why I thought it was a good idea. There's this idea that it can take care of itself in the background as long as you address all those pieces.
Yeah, very interesting. And the Starbucks thing is interesting too, because I think there's some studies have even shown like a dollar value in certain areas of what your property increases when there's within a certain radius from your property. Very interesting. Where did you mentioned Johns Hopkins has the portal, but where did you go when you say, okay, my residency is going to be here? What's step number one to find a place to rent?
You talk to the residents that are here. That's how I was able to zero in on these 2 or 3 neighborhoods, because they just kept coming up no matter which resident I spoke to. So you match into residency around March, mid-March, which gives you about 3-4 months. But my residency is such it doesn't begin till the second year. My intern year, you have the option, which a lot of residencies do, to do anywhere I wanted to. So I chose Arizona. So it gave me a 1-year kind of buffer. Looking back, maybe it would have been wiser to just be in the area, because I would have saved over almost 2% on my mortgage rate. But I wasn't really thinking about that back then. Didn't really mean much. But from that perspective, you have to talk to people who live there. They're the only ones that can tell you the truth. Everything looks great on paper. A lot of these properties get virtually staged online, and you look at the photos, everything looks great and fine. And they take photos of the building from outside, and you get there, and right outside, it's completely decrepit right next door because it's a brand new development. And you're not going to get that information unless you, A, talk to people, or B, like I did, I set aside a weekend, flew back in, and I drove around Baltimore. I saw what the neighborhoods were like. I saw what the transitional portions were like. And that's how I made the decision of which neighborhood I wanted to be in. Found some real estate agents just to explore. I wasn't going to sign paperwork that day. And once I got an idea, then I got serious. I had everyone I worked with recommended by someone. The former residents that were here were very helpful. One of them was my close friend for a long time. So I had that chain of communication going on, and that really helped guide my decision of where I wanted to be here.
Yeah, that's cool. And that is very similar to how we would look at investing in new markets for passive income as well, too. So looking at the area, what type of resources you're depending on, what type of resources you're leveraging, driving yourself, looking at the stuff yourself. So that all aligns. Makes me think, where does this start turning for you? Like what KPIs or what measurements or barriers that you have to knock down in order for you to actually take action in investing, whether it's in real estate or the next piece. So what are those KPIs that you're looking at?
Well, the biggest one is, how much money do you have to invest on hand? If it's your first home, you have certain programs that will help you out. They'll save you from that 20% down requirement, and potentially get you a 3 to 5% if you're a veteran. And 2, it's what are you looking to get out of this investment? Are you looking for immediate income? Are you looking to build your own business? Or are you looking to just sit on it and let it appreciate as a piece of property? All 3 factors. And then the 4 that also is how much money you have to put in after the fact. You can buy a piece of property, but if you get there and everything's outdated, the piping, the electrical, and everything, with all the constraints that you have nowadays, we're getting approval from the city for certain things to get done. You have to take that into account too. And also, how much time do you have to put into it? As a resident, I needed to get into a property that was already ready to go, no issues. And I wanted to move in and start residency. Residency, with the call schedule, we have 24-hour shifts. The last thing you want to worry about is pipes bursting in your home when you get home. Mm-hmm. So, and then also the type of community that the property is situated in. So that came into the house versus condo argument. And I was with my parents. They made a good point. It's like, what are you going to do in a 4-bedroom house by yourself all day? And at least when you live in a building, you have a community around you at all times. You feel part of it. And it's almost you feel safer. Especially in Baltimore, we've had a lot of residents that have been, victims of robbery in their own homes, not too far from the campus. That's another factor. Packages will get left out right in front of the home, and that's another issue. I have a doorman in my building. Everything's swiped to enter. There's always someone walking around. Everything's well lit. The building's heated, and my parking is indoors in a garage, which is also key. And then also, as you probably heard previously, my washer dryer was also in my unit. These are small things that over time will have a huge impact on your daily quality of life that you don't think about. but will eventually. You come home and you're looking for parking, it's going to annoy you at some point. If it's bad weather and you can't find a spot or you get a ticket, these things add up. These are all things you don't want to worry about. And it's kind of, you have to have like non-negotiables when you go in and what you need from it. And then the compromises come in after you find a specific place and you see the positives. But if you don't have those non-negotiables in place, then you're going to struggle on a day-to-day, which you don't want to do because that's unnecessary stress you want to add in. So really, it's a lot of, you got to sit down and kind of think about where you're going to be driving home one day. These thoughts that you won't have when you look at an empty place, because then you're in a completely different mindset. So I think there's a lot of pre-planning that goes into this, that it's helpful to have people who've done this, like your parents or friends or loved ones that have gone through the process that can tell you to think about these things. Without that, you can easily be misguided and make an abrupt decision.
Mm. Those four things that you mentioned, kind of those barriers or measures in order to start investing, say that those were in place for you. What are some things that you've thought about investing in relative to real estate? Like what are you hearing other people talk about? What are you seeing? And where are you seeing it?
Land. That's what I'm seeing a lot. That's what I'm hearing about a lot. Seem to see these clickbait articles all the time. Billionaires are buying farmland in Montana. My friend who's a EM doc out in Texas, he's been he's attending now, so he has a surplus of income. So now we've been talking about what would be good strategies to invest this, because obviously you want to diversify your portfolio. Not everything should be in just the S&P and your 401k. So we started looking at land and we realized even if you just buy farmland and you sit on it, it appreciates over time. You don't have to do a thing to it. It's just land. It takes care of itself. You have markers, coordinates where it starts and ends of what your private sector is. And then you could just sit on it. You could lease it out to companies. It started with, let's do a solar farm, or let's do a cannabis farm, or some sort of revenue generating farm. And all of these ideas were good when we talked about it, but when we looked at the numbers, even to get 1 acre of solar farm running, you have to put in almost like $1 million worth of investment in equipment. You have to get panel turners, the hydraulic system, someone to manage it.
And maintenance.
Then we realize exactly maintenance, and then you may not even make the returns that you're expecting because of a slew of issues. And also the market itself in that region is, right now we have incentives. What if we don't have them 5 years? Right now we have these panels. What if they become outdated in 5 years? So that's all these things that come with, investing in any type of business. We realize if we just buy farmland, we don't have to do anything. And there's a finite amount in this country. If you look at a lot of countries like India, China, I'm Indian, so I'm an immigrant, but I'm a citizen of America. I was looking at dual citizenship in India, and I realized even as a dual citizen, they do let you buy property, but they won't let you buy farmland. And that made me think, like, if a country won't even let its own foreign citizens buy farmland, that means it's valuable to them. It should be valuable, especially in America. We rely heavily on a lot of imports for a lot of our domestic goods, but one of our biggest assets is our ability to have our farmland that's so fertile. The West Coast, Arizona, and California, huge production sites. It comes from Mexico as well. But it's one of those simple investment strategies that I feel like will pay off without you having to worry about maintaining it. And there's a lot of beautiful land in America. We look at all these photos of Montana and Idaho and Arizona and Texas, and it's like, what if we were just to own it in regions where other people are buying? Yeah, we're not going to buy thousands of acres, but even if you buy a couple of acres, it's like buying a piece of gold bar or crypto that you don't know. Like, eventually it may have value, but at least with land, we know it won't depreciate significantly. It'll hold up against the stock market volatility. It's not volatile, and that's huge on that type of investment strategy versus others. So I feel like that's a good money shelter. Haven't looked into the tax liabilities of it. I'm sure there's a whole code written on just owning land. And I'm excited to see what the possibilities there are, because once you acquire land, you can parcel it out, you can live on a piece of it yourself, lease out others. And so that's one strategy I've been looking and very keen on investing in the coming years.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Yeah, there's lots of stuff around vacant land, farmland. Those are kind of a couple different ways to do it. It makes me think, I drive by farmland and then I see the road frontage is split off, and then like spec houses built on the front, but then the farmland is in the back. So much cool stuff there. And I love the way that your brain worked to go into the reason why behind all of that, as opposed to just, you mentioned the clickbait, like hitting it and then going for it, understanding the process behind it. You also have to watch out for analysis paralysis when you're overanalyzing, you're not taking action, kind of thing. No, that's very cool, and it's cool to learn that. Talking with your potentially partner in investing in these processes and where to go and what to do. I'm sure you'll hear a lot of other things around the water cooler, as it's said, types of investments to do and what not to do. Have you heard of anything not to mess with?
Restaurants.
What is it?
Just restaurants in general.
Oh, yeah.
As a physician, it's tough because you'll be in a unique position where you'll be sold to all the time, but half of that selling also plays into your patient outcomes. So you really have to kind of sit there and evaluate these companies, these reps that will buy lunches or host events and have you come attend them, with the data looks so great on stage, and now you're left with two great companies that have produced great products over the years. This is a third startup which you don't know much about, you kind of believe in, and now you're left with this decision to make. It's like, how much do you believe in your intelligence and ability to understand information when it's presented, and to take away the bias and to see what it holds for the future, not only for your patients but for yourself. With startups, what a lot of people don't realize, that even in medicine, we have a lot of startups that hold the same risks that any startup will have, which is that they can overnight go out of business. But the issue is, instead of losing money, you could potentially have patients with certain devices in place that these startups had. And now you have to either get rid of those devices or find alternative ways to manage them, because interventional pain is one of the few fields, aside from like cardiology, where the devices that you place require a lot of one-on-one interaction with the device rep, because there's a lot of titration, especially when it comes to neuromodulation. Even certain activities, certain day-to-day lifestyle can adjust how the electrodes from these devices are delivering electricity, and they adjust how they're delivering therapy. When that happens, the programming is done through the device rep or some sort of ancillary provider. When the company goes under, so do all those device reps, and that kind of just disappears. So I feel like, as a physician, I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it, because if you don't, then you're kind of also halting progress in terms of device creation and research and development. But when you do, you have to take these things into account as well. Like, what does it hold for the future of your patient? What if it is too good to be true? And then what if they're lying to you? And now you're legally implicated on this because you implanted this all over. So there's a lot of things that residency fellowship won't really prepare you for. It's really exposure that helps with it. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it. I'm saying if you do, there's a lot more to it than just working with a company. It's a lot more risk and a lot more involvement, because now you're not dealing with your money. Now you're dealing with your patient care. And that's, there's no monetary value you could assign to good patient care. So it's important for this type of thinking to come into play there. But other than that, it's everything has risk, and some things are going to be riskier than others. If you go through a fiduciary and follow the steps and give them their commission fee, you're likely going to make good returns over time. If you follow your buddy who's listening to podcasts all day, you may make a lot of money. You may also lose a lot of it. So it's really like, I tell everyone, if you're going to invest, pretend you're losing this money forever. So put it away, no matter what you buy, because you shouldn't be investing money that you need to be paying bills with. A credit card with a 20% APR is going to lose you more money than you putting that $1,000 away somewhere else over the year. There's a few things out there that are going to give you 20% ROI annually. But these are also decisions you have to make, like how much debt you have and your debt to income ratio, but also how much you can actually invest right now, because it's probably better for you to not to lose money than to try to gain it elsewhere. So it's not as simple, but like you said, the analysis paralysis, it helps when you have other people who are like-minded, but it also, like my buddy in Texas, I'm the one that's very, let's do this. And then he'll go and do all the research on it and tell us the ins and outs of why it's possible, why it's not. So it's good to have that, to continuously talk about it amongst your physician colleagues, some of whom may have MBAs or other experience just by virtue of being around. So that's, it's good to have those circles too before you do any of these things.
Yeah. Exposure is a key piece there. And you were referencing more along the lines of medical or healthcare profession, but exposure in investing is the same way. You can go out and learn, but once you expose yourself, you take action, you expose yourself, then there's the experience that's created from that. When I say expose yourself, it doesn't sound all that pleasant. Maybe you should find different words for that. But no, I think an exposure piece to gain the experience is really, really important. If you could go back to med school, or if you could speak to anybody who may be listening who's in med school right now, in regards to investing, being prepared, or studying, is there anything that you could tell those listeners out there right now that you have learned at this point that you would have liked to have known in med school?
I wish I knew more about my IRA back then. People don't know that there's an income cap to your IRA, and that in med school you're primed to maximize your investments. Yeah, obviously that means you're going to have investments. I have to have the capital to do it, but I wish I knew more about it, because a lot of the stocks I was looking at back then, Tesla, Apple, Nvidia, my portfolio would have probably gone 100 times what it is right now if I had more insight. But I had some insight, and I was able to see that growth over time. And now looking back, it's like Monday morning quarterback. I really almost had, if I could continue with this versus something else, it probably would have gained me a lot more income here. But two is also look at alternate revenue streams whenever you can, even as a med student. So while I was in med school, it's hard to find a job because you're in med school full time. So that left me with kind of limited options, especially in Syracuse. It's not like New York. New York City, you wake up, go work with some construction company for the summer, and they pay you. There's so much opportunity there. Any type of odd job. And that's another point. You shouldn't preclude yourself from a job just because of the position it is. Even as a resident, a couple of years ago, my parents' house in Queens, it's built in 1920s, as a lot of these Queens houses are. It's a 3-story. We made the top story an Airbnb since 2018. That kind of helped us dig us out of that hole. And I would property manage for that. I took it from what was making a couple of $100 a month to an average we were making $2,000 a month from this one floor. We were super host, and my job was to just kind of coordinate it. I realized scheduling was important. My dad, when he was doing it, he would just accept the first guest that would put an invite. And Airbnb was very restricted towards host not being open, so that kind of put us in a tough bind anyways. But once I realized that in between those weekend people that would come in, there were also people that needed long-term housing because hotels were so expensive. So I made the renting minimum for 30 days for our property. And that took away a lot of stress that I had of managing a new guest every week. Because every guest you have to host. I had to be available on my phone. If they had any problems with the heat, the water. Luckily, my parents were downstairs. So they could just run up and fix it. So we had that support system. But if that wasn't there, then you would have to have like a property manager, a soup, all these things to manage the day-to-day aspect of it. So that alternate revenue stream helped a lot during med school. But then during residency, one of the guests that came, the pipes burst upstairs and it flooded all the way down to this first floor. Airbnb refused to cover it because the pipes bursting, they blamed on the pipes, not the fact that the guy upstairs was doing laundry in the bathtub with a bucket. I was like, okay, fine. So now we're left. My grandparents are sleeping in the living room. The upstairs is destroyed. I'm in residency. I had a research month coming up. So I, packed my bag for the month, went to New York and signed up for Uber. And it was during the holidays, I was able to make like 5,000-6,000 extra dollars just driving Uber. I was driving all day. During night, I come home, do the research stuff I had to do. And I was as a resident. And people would, I pick up people all the time, and they're like, "Oh, what do you do? Is this your full-time job?" I'm like, "No, I'm actually a resident at Johns Hopkins." And they were like, "What?" Like, yeah, just helping out my parents. It's so funny. One of the days I picked up someone. I'm like, "So what do you do?" He's like, the guy's like, "Oh, I'm a Payne fellow at this institution." And I turn around and it's a guy who I've met at several conferences in the last year. I'm like, "What? It's such a small world." So I'm like, "Let's keep this between us." And he's like, "No, no, no. The PD will love it. She loves the kind of like hustler, go-getter attitude." And it gave me a unique perspective because my father is a yellow cab driver in New York his entire life, and the man, he would at some point put 3 kids. And we were living in a basement before we bought our house. He's working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, and I do that as a resident, but I'm practicing something I love and wanted to do my entire life. My dad's not passionate about taxi driving. He just did it because it's what he had to do. But what really struck me the most was he did it during a time where there was no technology. You had to drive around and pick up fares. I have Uber, just like click, 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 click. It's a very streamlined process. And it really made me appreciate all the sacrifices my father made through the year. And I don't think I would have had that appreciation if I didn't, pick up the wheel and start doing it myself. So it's one of those things that you really have to swallow your pride and focus on the bigger photo, because no one's, there may be a little bit of embarrassment initially because you go from being in a professional class to a working class. But I think if you just realize that physicians are just glorified public servants, it's a lot easier to pick up any job as an income stream because you're only going to help yourself and no one's going to knock you down the line for supporting your family and doing whatever you had to do honorably. It's not like I was out there stealing money from people. I was just working per hour and, getting as much as I could. So I think that was a huge kind of thinking pattern that helped me in terms of getting where I am. Just realizing that there's no job that you're too good for. Like, if you tell me to broom up a room, I will clean it the best I can because that's the level of work and effort I put into anything I do. Whether it's a research paper or a small task, you should give your 100%. And I met some interesting people driving Uber. One of them was actually a real estate investor in New York who would take these old developments. I'm like, "Oh, do you demolish them?" He's like, "No, if you demolish it, then you have to abide by the new building code. If you renovate it, you abide by the old building code, which is a lot looser." And he's like, when you own a building, you have something called a depreciating asset, which when you start to make a lot more money, you realize the value of just investing in a building, because a building, being a building, loses money. And he threw so much information at me. I'm just like eating this up because no one's ever explained that to me before. I'm like, wow, that's crazy. That would never would have happened had I not picked you up on this Uber. So I got his number. He's like, "Hey man, whenever you're ready, give me a call. Whatever amount of money you want to invest, we can talk and find a plan that's more suitable for you." So it worked out. Nice. And my parents' house got picked.
Nice. Yeah, the Airbnb piece is really cool, although there are some challenges with it. The mentality or the human nature of that we all have, of whether it's pushing a broom or pushing a pen or whatever it may be, good work is good work. And I know it takes a lot to learn that, but yeah, when you look back and you see what your father did, what you get to do, there's a difference. There's a genuine peace that's created inside of a person when you're able to do that and do it to the best of your ability. I absolutely love it. If the listeners want to reach out and get a hold of you, I think we talked that LinkedIn's the best way. What's the best way they can get a hold of you?
LinkedIn is the best way. It's just linkedin.com/Harman-Chopra. It's my full name. Shoot me a message. I'm pretty responsive as I can be with the amount of messages I get some days, but yeah, I'm open and I'm happy to talk to anyone.
It's awesome. So Harman, thank you for your time today. Thank you for sharing your experience and early on in your journey here. Best wishes to you as well as your family here as they carried you up to this point. Now you get to carry them. How about that?
Oh, it's a privilege. Honestly, I'm fortunate to have such a strong base because, everything I said, it's on the virtue of having such supportive parents. Like being the property manager on site is not easy. You have to cater to people, and my parents are getting. I don't want to have to see them have to do that, but we got it done, and that's behind us, and now we can move to bigger things.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you to Dr. Harman Chopra for sharing his insights on real estate, alternative income strategies, and the importance of financial growth for physicians. Connect with him on LinkedIn to follow his journey and gain more inspiration.